people who've turned up on time for the session. Should we crack on? You happy for us to get going?
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. My name's Joe Hubbock. I'm a partner at Elixirr, and I'm also the company CISO. And I'm very happy to welcome you to our webinar on breaches, blunders, and breakthroughs, real lessons from the cyber frontline. And I'm delighted to have Jonathan Lloyd-White, the global CISO of Bupa, here with us this afternoon for this conversation. I'll do a brief intro, hand over to Jonathan, and then we will get into the conversation on each of the topics and see where we go. So just briefly on myself, as I said, I'm a partner at Elixirr and also the company CISO. My background is as an electronics engineer, 10 years in industry, and then went to McKinsey, co-founded the cyber practice there, served clients on the topic, and then post McKinsey went back into industry, back on the other side of the desk, let's say, and also spent some time in private equity investing in cybersecurity companies. So I've kind of seen cyber from an operational perspective, from an advisory perspective, and from an investment perspective. And known Jonathan for a number of years since we did some research together. But very nice to have you all here today. And over to you, Jonathan, for your intro.
Great. Thank you very much, Joe. And thanks, everybody, for joining. It's a real privilege to be here and to talk to you this afternoon. So I'm currently the group CISO of Bupa, the health insurance and provider company, global company, currently 61 million customers around the world, and growing fast, really get going business at the moment, doing super well. And I've been here for only 6 months. Joined in February and it's flown. I'll talk to you a little bit about that later on. Before joining Bupa, I've been a group CISO for about a dozen years or so. Before this role, I was the group CISO for a company called Natura, Brazilian cosmetics company, retail company that owned Avon and The Body Shop and Aesop. Fantastic company, really inspirational company to work for. And before that, I was in International Airlines Group. Before that, a Japanese bank, Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation. And before that, HM Revenue and Customs, the UK's tax authority, where I was the group CISO for 4 or 5 years. Before that, I've done a whole load of crazy things. I've worked in the Ministry of Defence. I've helped set up what was the Serious Organised Crime Agency, now the NCA. I've run HMRC's data analytics function and intelligence function. And right at the start of my career, I was a drugs intelligence officer. So doing car chases and arresting people and checking flights for smugglers and all that sort of thing. So a rich and varied background.
Thank you, Jonathan. And building on that rich and varied background, we will welcome questions today. And clearly you can ask Jonathan questions on many topics.
Ask what you like. Ask what you like. That's right.
But yeah, we're very happy to have an interactive session today. This is set to go till 3:45. We will work through each of breaches, blunders, and breakthroughs, and try to share stories really and examples of what we've seen in our careers, and especially from Jonathan's perspective as a with all the things he's seen, trying to tease out the insights from that. We hope that this will help you in your day jobs, whether you're a security professional or have other roles in your organization, to have an awareness and an understanding of cyber, the risks, and some of the techniques and ways of working in cybersecurity effectively. We have the chat function or the Q&A function as part of this webinar, so please feel free to post questions in that area. You click the button and then do the normal stuff. I'm sure people have been on webinars before. If you've got any issues, just raise your hand and we'll see if we can help. But please do feel free to throw questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring that, or in the Q&A, sorry, during the course of the session, and we're happy to pick them up and respond as we go through. Otherwise, I'm sure you'll be able to, Jonathan and I can go on for quite a long time.
Oh, yes.
Based on previous conversations. So, yeah, I welcome questions throughout, and, please, hopefully it's useful for you all. Okay, I think that's all the setup things, and let's get into it. So the first topic, breaches. I know we've worked together on a few things, but when we were doing the preparation for this, Jonathan, you were talking about confidential papers blowing in the breeze, password selling, key loggers, these kind of things.
That's right.
Could you share a couple of stories of breaches that or security issues that you've seen that people might find interesting, and we can unpack what happened?
Yeah, I can indeed. So it's a fine line between a breach and a blunder sometimes. So I'll try and focus just on breaches to start with. I've led a little bit of a charmed life, I think, so far as a group CISO, in as much that I've not had to deal with a really horrendous incident. I always seem to take on jobs just after they've happened. Which is the secret of a long life, I think, because suddenly boards are very interested in cybersecurity and willing to show some attention and money and effort. So, but I could talk about some of the ones that I've been closely related to. And I always think of a chap called Brian, whose job it was to walk towards my desk and break bad news when I was in government. And whenever I saw Brian approaching my desk, I knew there was trouble. And we were having roughly 1,000 incidents a month of various scales in government, a very intense job, and never quite sure what you're dealing with. But they could have involved 0 days, of course, those vulnerabilities that pop up and cause you a huge amount of hassle, neither a blunder nor a breach sometimes, but something you've got to respond to as though it was a breach. So it reminded me of all those things like WannaCry and NotPetya and Log4j and Heartbleed and all these other things that you have to respond to like a breach, because it could be a breach very quickly. Also reminded me of incidents that we've had. Sorry,
this is HMRC. This was when you're in government.
Yeah, mostly, yeah, but subsequently as well, when I was in finance in Japanese bank, when we had WannaCry, I think, the big vulnerability there that caused so much pain and heartache in the NHS, and you have to respond as though in the same mode as though you're having an attack, because you've got to fix something before an attacker gets to you and exploits that vulnerability. And very often you don't know if it's a problem that's live for your environment, so you've got to first establish whether you've got that problem in your environment, which is not a simple thing to do, and then drop everything to try and fix that issue as quickly as you can. So it feels like an incident. You run it through an incident panel, and you have to deal with it as intensely as that.
It's if I may pull on this thread, it's interesting maybe for everybody to realize that you were running 1,000 incidents a month. So 1,000 events would happen in any month, what's this, 15, 20 years ago in HMRC, that would require the head of security to respond to and to deal with. And they'd be and clearly they're not all actually breaches, right?
That's
but
right.
it's a very busy job, but in
Very
those days,
job.
right?
Yeah, several things going on a day where you're making a very rapid judgment call on whether it's something that I have to step into, or whether it's being handled adequately, and you can just keep a watching brief. And as you said at the start, that could be anything and everything from a cyber attack through to papers being lost in office moves, through to people downloading things or uploading things, a huge variety of different incidents. And when I first took on that job, it was my first serious security job. You don't have a calibration for what's serious and what's not, and you very quickly learn when you have to step in and when your antenna twitch and it's something that could materialize. The really tricky thing is when I escalate. So the last thing you want to do is be panicking every 2 minutes. So you've got to learn how much you can hold, and when the moment is that you have to escalate. And it does put me in mind of one of the things that happened very early in my tenure in that role, probably 6-8 weeks in, and I was made aware of a third-party breach, and I have to be careful about what I disclose here, but there was an outsourcing arrangement with another government department to make payments. That government department had outsourced the payments to a payment platform for a bank. That bank had outsourced the handling of the IT to an IT company, who had outsourced the data center to a data center company, who'd outsourced the disk maintenance to a contracting company, who'd outsourced it to a bunch of contractors. And those contractors had
seventh order,
6th or 7th order, and
goodness me,
and those contractors had taken some disks out of a server and thought they could make a few quid on eBay, so chucked them in their bag and took them home. Unbeknownst to them, they had several hundreds of millions of records on them of a very sensitive nature. And of course, when you're new to the job, you get this notice from the department that we're affiliated with to say we've got this issue, and I go, okay, don't know if that's good or bad. But then shortly later, I had a phone call from the Chancellor's office, and he'd obviously found out about it via a different route and wanted to talk to me. And I happened to be on a train at the time, and in unusual quick thinking said, "Sorry, sir, I'm on a quiet carriage. I can't talk," and hung up because I needed some time to figure out what to do. So yes, you quickly learn when to panic and when not.
We'll come back. I know when we talk about breakthroughs, we'll probably end up talking about supply chain or third-party risk management as well. But incredible, right? 7 layers.
7 layers of that's right.
Of partnering of handoffs that then result in a breach that you are effectively still responsible for.
Yeah, exactly that. And that taught me a lot about the power of the supply chain and the depths to which you need to go in the evidence chain. It's like a chain of evidence. You've got to follow that chain of evidence through a contract chain to make sure that you've got the levers to pull when you need to get that supply chain to do the remediation work pretty quickly. And you very quickly discover that some of those levers that you thought you had are rubber, and you pull them and nothing happens. And you've got to find different ways to get people to jump at the speed that the Chancellor expects.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Well, actually, while we're talking about it, let's talk about it while it's fresh in mind. What's that experience? How has that shifted how you think about doing supply chain security or managing your supply base, even in your current job? Because you can't possibly look 7 layers deep, right?
You can't. No. But you have to make sure that the first layer that you're dealing with are very clear on their accountabilities and responsibilities, and are clear that they have to have that passed down through their supply chain as well. And your only reliever really is with the first layer of engagement. So you have to be clever about the way in which you construct the security schedule that you pass on to them to make sure that they have accountability and ownership of their supply chain further down the stack.
So you hope for the cascade, basically.
You've got very little option but to do that. So that's where the effort has to go. And of course, in a company like Bupa, we've got tens, if not hundreds of thousands of suppliers of all different shapes and sizes, from small dentist firms through to people that supply robotics, surgery tools, through to insurance IT providers, all those types of things. Then you really have to get smart about how you prioritize that and focus on making sure that the most risky suppliers in your ecosystem are aware of their accountabilities.
Got you. I've got a couple of breaches that I can share on, but I think you also mentioned password selling and keyloggers. I don't know if there's any other breaches you'd like to think are interesting for the group.
Keep it anonymous as well. So the keylogger one, again, that was in the finance sector. And I suppose this is an example of why I always think of security as an additive business. No security risks ever completely disappear. They always seem to go through a cycle. And the one I'm thinking of was a situation where a security guard was either coerced or was in with a bad crowd who he allowed into the building at night, who installed physical keyloggers on the back of someone's PC. And of course, what that did is just a plugin allowed that gang to capture passwords. I mean, you wouldn't do that anymore. You do that digitally, of course, but it's not to say you couldn't do it, but it's less likely. And of course, from that point, having the credentials, we're able to instigate a massive payment heist that would have been one of the world's biggest bank heists. But they were caught because of a spelling mistake in a transaction that was spotted and stopped, and they're now in jail. So, but the lesson I take from that is that the security, that the attackers move on, and sometimes stop doing things, but it doesn't mean that the risk is entirely gone. So the risk of USBs still being used is still there, although we've got controls to manage it. Those controls are never perfect. So it's an additive business. Nothing ever completely falls off the end of the conveyor belt. You just add more risk, is the way I see it.
Well, an insider threat is a real thing as well, right?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, that's right.
I've seen that a number of times with, there was a case of in a previous organization where South American business kept missing out on deals. And it's the classic story of somebody selling intel, or at least giving access so that other parties could see emails and see negotiation points, and undercut on deals.
By a dollar. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's right. Yeah,
it happens a lot. It's one of the ones that I've worked through, which is publicly known about, is the Harris Schools attack that happened in 2021, and that struck me because of the sort of unexpected depth of technology that's happened in an organization that perhaps hadn't necessarily been fully realized at the leadership level. So a big theme for me, having worked in industry for nearly 30 years, is we've gone from relatively analog businesses that were starting to use computers in various places to being so digitally dependent that it's almost, if you're more senior in an organization now, you might not quite realize how much of the underlying fabric of the company has become digital. And the Harris Schools was a great example of that, of quite the pervasive nature of technology required to gain access, for the pupils to gain access to the schools, to pay for their lunch, to get into lessons, to get their homework. It's just incredible how far the school system has become digitized. And I remember it was a Sunday, I was sitting trying to watch some sport on telly, like you do on a Sunday afternoon, and got a call from one of the board members saying, it seems that our schools might have been attacked. You can help with that, right?
Can you fix it?
Yeah,
by lunchtime tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. And can we get back online? And so by the evening, we'd sort of given them access to our incident response engineers, and they were starting to look at what had happened. And it was just absolutely fascinating seeing the response. I guess there's 2 or 3 big things I'd pick out of that. That was the engagement with the hackers was quite amusing, because they'd looked at the public accounts of Harris and assumed that they had hundreds of millions of pounds that they could just hand over, because they'd just been given their government grant for funding. And so the hackers had done their homework to say, right, where can we make some money? This organization seems to have a lot of cash. We think we can ransom them. And so they were sort of going after all of this money. And I loved watching the ransomware negotiator that we had in our team engage with the hackers, and observing the character they play. And I'm sure you've seen this. One of my favorite thing about ransomware negotiators is they pretend to be someone from the organization who's far less capable than themselves. And it's like, hello, I'm Joe from accounts. My computer's not working. I was given your email address to get it fixed. And just buying time. It's quite a fun job. But and just seeing how we played for time, the one saving grace on that attack was that the Revil was the attack group. They attacked the schools on the first day of the Easter holidays, which was a daft failing in the understanding of the British calendar.
Yes, exactly,
and we actually had 4 weeks to get up and running again. So I don't know if you've seen similar behaviour from attackers.
I mean, sometimes we give them too much credit. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Zealous breach that happened a year or 2 ago, which is a big HR provider, and loads and loads of companies use them. British Airways, Boots, and loads of others were in the news for a while because they use this payroll provider called Zealous. And I was on the edges of that, and we thought we'd lost a load of payroll information. And we were in touch with the hackers, and suddenly they went quiet on us, and we thought, what's going on? We were expecting a payment demand here, what's happening here? And eventually they wrote to us and said, no, we haven't got your data. We're like, well, we know you've got our data. We saw you take it. And we said, well, what's going on? And they said, no, we haven't got your data. And then eventually we worked out that they'd overwritten the data by mistake with someone else's data. So they no longer had it. So yes, they can make mistakes too, and very often do, and sometimes to your advantage.
Catch a lucky break.
Catch a lucky break. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. The other one that I was going to share is an attack that a client had. It's a food production company, and so they think about food safety, and they think about protecting formulations and these kind of things, and they do all the normal work on data protection, all the standard things. one thing they hadn't spotted was the label printing machines on the production lines were on obsolete servers that were exposed to the internet. And it's a critical vulnerability if you can't put labels on sandwiches.
Yeah.
And the attackers attacked them on Christmas Eve. And then the poor executives had the worst Christmas ever. 2 weeks trying to recover just because they couldn't actually print labels and send out the food. And they lost a lot of business doing that. And the thing for me there is just this, it was a number of years ago, but it's just the learning of looking at what are the real value streams in the company.
Absolutely.
And where are our vulnerabilities. So I think we sort of shared a few perspectives then on breaches we've seen and the type of anecdotes of what happens. Let's start talking a little bit about the blunders part then and the common missteps. Now, before we go there, I'll just check with Stacey. I think I've got the Q&A panel open. I don't see any questions in yet, but I do. If people do want to ask questions, please don't hesitate to type them in. Or Stacey, if you can see some that I've not seen, then just speak up. But otherwise, we will keep going. And hopefully it's useful for folk.
Yeah, you look okay to carry on at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So blunders, Jonathan, which nobody wants to admit to. I quite like the way we call them common missteps on the flyer.
Common missteps, that's right,
What's your view of common missteps or blunders?
Good question. So I'll just follow through on sort of the boundary with breaches to start with, and this kind of personal things. Then we might think more about the kind of institutional blunders that you can make and the more systemic things. But some of the other incidents, obviously, you mentioned the sort of risks never go away; they just get slightly less prevalent, and that was to do with paper. And you mentioned it earlier about sort of papers blowing in the wind. We had an office closure. Where people hadn't properly emptied filing cabinets. They'd left, they'd gone, they didn't bother about the 10 filing cabinets in the basement that nobody's looked at for years. And of course, the contractors come in to clear the building, dump them all in the skip, and the wind blows, and suddenly you've got tons of very confidential paper blowing around. And you get a phone call on a Friday afternoon saying, we've just found this paper, and what do you want to do with it? And so again, that's another story about the risks never completely go away. We don't produce and never. I've printed something for years now, but nevertheless, there's still physical security risks that you need to think about, and there are still papers around. So that was one thing. And office closures. The other thing I was just going to mention in terms of incidents, and this is again another legacy risk that's maybe not so prevalent, but has a modern twist on it. We had a very skilled, very clever analyst who was testing out various online tools for text mining, new technology back in the day, and had cut and pasted a huge amount of sensitive data into an online tool to test it. Not realizing, of course, that's basically publishing it to the internet, and obviously that's an old thing. Two lessons from that is it's not that different from uploading data to a LLM, ChatGPT. Same risk exactly, just different technology. But also, what do you do when someone self-discloses that they've messed up like that? A real sort of dilemma. Clearly a sacking offence, just blindingly stupid thing to do, and very, very serious consequences for the sensitivity of the information that we had, sort of national security type stuff. But you want to encourage a culture of reporting and disclosure of mistakes, and don't penalise someone if they self-disclose, but a real dilemma because you can't sack someone when they do that. So that was a lesson for me in just thinking through how you navigate that particular issue. So there are a couple of examples of sort of historic things that have got modern read across, and that ChatGPT is relevant as well.
I know it's we probably don't want to get political, but I have seen in the last year someone not get sacked for including a reporter on a chat group, and
yes, that's true enough.
Sharing extremely sensitive information. But there we go. No comment on that one.
No comment on that one. Nor the more recent one in the UK where the PermSec of Defence has had to go as well. So for another similar disclosure. That's right.
There we go. We talked a bit in the prep about. And this links a bit to the previous stuff we've done on lemons, about a common blunder being assuming a tool will solve all your problems.
Yes.
I think you've got interesting perspectives on that side of things, right?
Yeah,
Depending on
really
the
good.
tech.
Yeah, exactly. We do have a bit of a prevalence for just buying stuff in security. And yeah, the work that you did before is still very current and relevant around how we make decisions on tools to buy and when to buy and when the tool isn't the answer at all. I think as an industry, we're still pretty rubbish at selecting the right tool to solve the problem that we're trying to fix. And most companies are littered with security tools that are half switched on or just whirring away in the background and everyone's forgotten to look at. So yeah, I think that's a very strategic blunder that we continue to make on a regular basis. That the market doesn't help us because it's still vastly overpopulated with tools and vendors and opportunities for CISOs to spend money. I was just saying before we started, I'm just getting cold calls constantly all day. So
yes,
that is a real challenge. And probably the opposite as well, which is missed opportunities to solve problems that are there. But yeah, so vendor selection, a real challenge for CISOs and procurement teams, and just buying stuff before you really know the capability of the tool. So that's absolutely right.
Well, and I see it. I got a very current issue at the moment where clients have bought a tool. It may actually end up working well. I'm just thinking of extremely simple things such as tools that support you having an asset register or a CMDB.
Yeah.
And the tool may be in place, but it's not actually properly populated. So you don't get the security benefit of the visibility you need.
Yeah.
Information isn't maintained. And I think that sometimes we fall into the blunder of getting excited and hearing the sales pitch and thinking, right, we just install that and then we'll be okay. And the whiz-bang machine, the black box will protect us.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you do need to do quite a bit of work to make security tooling effective.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it takes time to maintain and run these things, right?
Precisely. That's exactly right. And you need the headcount to go with the tool very often. And very often we're sold tools that are going to save time, energy and money and resources and staff. But very often the case is that you need someone, at least with the capability and competence to do it. And very often in security teams, that's one person that understands that tool well enough to leverage it and use it well. And if they move on or if they get promoted or something else, then or distracted by another tool, then they just whir away and keep a data center warm somewhere. So that is a real problem. So tool consolidation is job number one, and then tool selection and doing it wisely is the next thing. And that's a black art, I have to say. It's a very tough market to get right. There's something related to that I was just going to mention around services as well, because tools is one thing, but services is the other. The other thing that other big blunders that you can make is buy a service like a managed security service provider, MSSP. You go and buy a SOC, you go and visit it. It's got lovely blue downlighting and big screens and people looking like they're working very hard and it all looks very sexy and cool.
Probably wearing hoodies, I guess.
Probably wearing hoodies, yeah.
We debated wearing black t-shirts today, but we figured we're just middle-aged men.
That's right, yeah. We're not going to away with that. But and on the whole, they provide fantastic services, very good. But having the ability to really manage that supplier network, which becomes part of your security ecosystem, is a skill in itself. And very often security teams are full of brilliant people who are technically fantastic, but maybe haven't got experience in driving out best service from security providers and companies.
Yes.
They're not procurement specialists, they're not vendor managers. And to really get the best out of a security operations center, you really need to deeply understand the technology. You need to understand the business processes that it drives. You need to understand the data coverage. You need to understand the rules that are in place, how that lays across your risks, and then drive that vendor to constantly improve, continually improve that service. And that's a skill in itself, which I don't think as a security community we're particularly good at. You need to understand commercials, procurement, finances, logging, data, rules, threats, risks, reporting, all of things to get the best out of a security service. And without someone driving that, they don't do it. They just don't do it. You need to drive it.
You've triggered a phrase in my head that maybe other people already know, but supplier fatigue or service fatigue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is actually a thing. You're absolutely right. The number of times I've seen either actually in our own business or in other businesses where in clients where it's all fine and dandy for the first year. Everybody's excited. Stuff's well managed. Year 2, it sort of starts to drift. And by year 3, you're like, oh, it's not the same as it used to be. And you have to look at yourself just as much as the vendor.
Yeah.
to say, or the partner, you say, have we helped this service evolve? So I
Exactly,
think
yeah.
service or partner fatigue is a common misstep, and
Yep.
actually probably happens
Yep.
nearly everywhere.
Yep.
That you have to
agree.
refresh. I'm
Yeah.
keen to get onto breakthroughs because I think that's an interesting area.
Yes.
But are there any other big blunders? I mean, we did talk about the human factor as a common misstep, and
Yep.
not doing enough on that side. I don't know if you've got anything to share on the blunders around the human factor, or dealing with
Well,
legacy. I think was the other thing we talked about. Wasn't
well,
it?
both those things really. I suppose I've given enough examples of the human factor
Yeah,
in
true,
breaches
true.
and blunders. But yeah, now well, maybe related to that slightly, and it's a strategic blunder, I think, is that we remain a very male-dominated sector. So is it
Yeah.
a blunder, a cultural thing? I don't know, but I'm passionate about diversity within the security community. Another crazy fact from my past, I've got a master's degree in feminism, so I've got the credentials to demand that we have an equality in the cybersecurity industry. And I don't think we help ourselves by using very violent language around penetration testing and weaponization and all these other phrases that we use and all that sort of stuff. We're a very kind of, I don't know, macho kind of culture in a way in the security sector. And why would you want to be part of that if you're not, not in the club? So I think that's a cultural systemic blunder for us.
Well, I'm trying to make it seem like it's more mysterious than it is.
Exactly.
I mean, this is why we're even doing this. It's not mysterious.
No, not
the
at
thing
all.
I've loved about everything I've seen you do in your organizations is it's operational. It's about doing this, getting the sensible things in place. It's not like some incredible martial art where you have to, and these sort of, you see the things on the CISO chat groups where people are trying to sort of almost flex and show how good they are at the tech.
Yeah.
When actually most of security is actually getting the operational bits right.
Yeah, and well, that's a good point. And the other side of that is, it drives me crazy when someone goes on the telly after a breach and says, "Well, they didn't get the basics right," as though we're all idiots, and not explaining the fact that doing the basics is really, really hard.
Well, I feel sorry for a current grocer.
Yes, indeed.
Friends in that team. It's not like nobody ever thought that, oh my God, they're crazy. Yeah. It's like they were the same as the rest of us. It's just there was a novel attack technique.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
So let's talk positively. Yeah. What do you think? Indeed. I was thinking about this. Like, what do I think has genuinely got better in the last 20 years? Even it doesn't need to be the last year or so, but what do you think the breakthroughs are that you've seen in security?
Gosh, well, I suppose, again, at a very strategic level, breakthroughs in the last 10 years or so since I've been doing this. I guess I've always been in sectors where, as I say, I've just followed a breach so the board is interested. But I think boards are now much more interested, feel more culpable and responsible for cybersecurity, and are desperate to learn more and ask the right questions of their CISO.
So the breakthrough in engagement with the
absolutely.
leadership.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not just number one on the risk register because they don't understand it. I think now understanding has increased, and it's still number one on the risk register for most companies. So I think that's really important. Other more sort of detailed things, I think we're starting to get smarter at using the data that we have from all these devices that are wearing away. I would say over the last 10 years, we've just added tools to our tool set and not joined them up and not thought about how they tell us a story about risk and the control environment within our environment.
This is your data fabric point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you pull it, so if you imagine all your devices, all your network devices, all your servers have security tools and applications on them that are wearing away. None of those things speak to each other particularly, but if you can draw that data into one view and ask questions of it, you suddenly get a highly complex, rich picture of where your real risks are. And we're moving from a kind of people go and look at the tools, put something on a spreadsheet, send it into the group. They turn it into a PowerPoint slide that then becomes a PDF, and it's months old by the time you get there. We're moving to a kind of live natural language questions on top of huge data sets that
Yeah.
allow you to answer very basic questions about your environment very quickly. And just that simple act of using data to get visibility on what's really going on is revolutionary. That will allow us to get much smarter about what we're investing in and the priorities that we need to take. So I'm really excited about that.
For the audience, what kind of question would you ask into such the system? It's sort of beyond continuous controls monitoring, right? It's more complex than that.
But even that's a good start, because we're not very good at that yet. So yeah,
Right.
you could just ask a natural language question. Which of my laptops across 80,000 devices have not been patched to the latest version?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So interrogating your CMDB.
Simple question, but impossibly difficult to get to in any meaningful sense using traditional traditional tools and techniques. Or you could ask, where have I got good endpoint protection but weak vulnerability management? And put those two things together, and suddenly you get a visibility on where your controls are missing. So back to my point about a remote destination off in the far-flung places where the controls maybe aren't as good, you can hone in on that rapidly and fix those problems much more quickly. Whereas at the moment, you'd have to go and ask Matey in some far-flung place whether he's done his patching job or not. Yeah. And you might never get an answer. So you can now get to that much faster.
Telemetry is massively improved. And visibility.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what do you think? I was thinking of, I actually think that the shift to SaaS, the shift to cloud has actually, I think that is actually a breakthrough, because it's actually sort of outsourced a lot of the security work on maintaining on-premise devices, server farms. There's actually a lot of security that's aggregated into, the SaaS providers, the cloud providers, that has actually made it easier for me as a CISO, because I know that Microsoft's dealing with it. And how much do you think that is that and security automation, I think, is another breakthrough, just tools that, there's less manual or process work required because the tools manage the risk.
I haven't seen the security automation live up to the hype yet. I think there's a gap there, but there's definitely space in the sort of security operations center that benefits from that automation. But the move to SaaS, yes, I agree. I think there is a big security benefit there, but you've got to be able to leverage that by having the right skills and experience and technology in-house to manage it. So it's a changing risk landscape, not just an improving one, because very often you're never quite off-prem, so you still need all your on-prem expertise and skills, because only new companies, you've still got something. Most companies have anyway. They've been around for a while, so you need both. The mindset's very different for managing cloud risks. It's a shared model, not an outsourced model. So you've still got a huge amount of responsibility for configuration of your cloud environment to make sure you get that right and don't screw up and leave everything open. So that's a change in mindset. Plus, you've also got the kind of profligation of cloud environments. So they might, on the whole, be more secure. But if you have hundreds more of them that aren't going through a central governance chain, then you've just spread the risk around that makes it harder to manage. So it's a different risk landscape, not a better one, is what I usually say.
Yeah. Okay. I suppose I would have got to arguing it was better because the recoverability is slightly easier.
That's massive
when you've got that as well, right? And
if you've configured it correctly. If you've correctly.
Well, that too, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but the backup environment has become easier, I think, over time versus what we had. But the ability to recover, which is a massive part of resilience. I mean, we've got 44 minutes in. I think that's the first time we've said the word resilience. Yeah, which is quite
all about resilience.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big part of it. I realise we're actually just hit our line, so we probably should try and draw a conclusion. But thank you very much for sharing all of those stories, Jonathan, about breaches you've seen, the blunders, the breakthroughs. My sense is that what I'm taking from what you've shared today is sort of, from a breaches perspective, expect the unexpected. Look in the corners. Don't just look just look at the obvious, and be prepared for the non-obvious things to happen. I think from a blunder perspective, it's probably more about operational effectiveness than, it's about actually making sure you can maintain what you're planning on doing, if that's a fair way of describing the kind of common missteps.
Yeah.
It's sort of not thinking through fully.
Yeah.
And breakthroughs, it sounds like it's related to the use of data, the use of
Definitely.
the tooling, and being, effective in using the new tooling that's available. Because there is an explosion of capability. It's just whether or not you can actually leverage those breakthroughs.
Exactly that, and get the workforce more diverse. That would be my other breakthrough. That's
Very good.
Big one to get in there as well.
Yeah,
so.
100% agree. Well, I'll just ask one more time, Stacey. I don't think anybody had any questions, but just to check I've not missed anything.
There was just one question in the chat, which to conclude is, what steps can a company take to improve its cybersecurity? Which I think would be a nice sentence to end on.
So I'll go first and then give Jonathan time to think.
Yeah.
So I think the very first step that a company should take to improve its cybersecurity is to understand what it's trying to protect. So be clear on what risk you're trying to manage. Where would it hurt you most if you had a cyber attack? Second thing I'd say is make sure you've got the capabilities you need. So look at what muscle do I need, what capability do I need, and then have I got it? And then the third thing is keep a track of how you're delivering on that. Have you really installed the security controls you thought you were going to install? That would be my top three. I don't know, Jonathan, what would you say?
Oh, just an overlay on that. I would just encourage everyone to use a framework. Cyber's you can get lost very quickly, so go find a Cyber Essentials or a NIST tool set, framework that just allows you to break the problem down into nice bite-sized chunks, get an assessment done on your current capability, and grind your way through the improvement actions. That's what it's all about, day in, day out.
Very good. Thank you very much, Jonathan, and
Pleasure.
thank you, Stacey, for your
Joe.
help. Thanks everybody for listening. And if you'd like to follow up any questions with either of us, you can find us. I'm sure we'll be sharing my email address, and I'm sure you can find Jonathan on public forums. So very good. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.